Emma Clark pressed the button on the control panel, and the paper targets whirred down the range toward the firing line. It was barely 7 in the morning at Desert Wind Shooting Range, just outside the gates of Naval Air Station Fallon in Nevada, and already the heat was building. She had been working here for 8 months, and the routine had become as automatic as breathing. Set the targets, check the distance markers, sweep the brass casings from yesterday's shooters, make sure the safety equipment was in place, stay quiet, stay invisible, go home. That was how Emma preferred it, invisible. She was 32 years old, though people often guessed younger. She wore her dark hair in a simple ponytail, kept her head down, and spoke only when necessary. The owner of the range, a retired Army sergeant named Bill Hoskins, had hired her without asking too many questions. He had seen something in her eyes during the interview, a kind of deep weariness that he recognized from his own mirror, and decided she deserved a chance. "You know guns?" he had asked. "Yes, sir," Emma had replied. "You okay with hard work and early mornings?" "Yes, sir." "Can you handle being around military folks? We get a lot of Navy personnel out here, SEALs especially. They can be intense." Emma had hesitated only a moment. "I can handle it." That had been enough for Bill. She had proven to be his best employee, always on time, never complained, did her work efficiently and thoroughly. She never called in sick. She never asked for favors. She simply showed up, did her job, and left. The other employees had tried to befriend her at first. Jenny, the young woman who worked the front counter, had invited her to lunch several times. Marcus, the range safety officer, had attempted to make conversation during slow periods, but Emma's polite deflections eventually got the message across. She was there to work, not to socialize. The truth was, Emma couldn't afford to let people get close. Getting close meant questions, and questions meant answers she wasn't ready to give. At 7:30, the first customers began arriving. Emma recognized them immediately, Navy SEALs from the base. They came 2 or 3 times a week, usually in groups of 4 to 8, to practice their shooting skills. They were easy to spot even out of uniform. The confident walk, the athletic build, the way they moved with casual awareness of everything around them. This morning's group was led by a man Emma had seen before, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and the kind of swagger that came from knowing you were among the best. She had heard the others call him Lieutenant Brennan. He was the type who always had a joke ready, always had to be the center of attention. "Morning," Bill called out to the group from the range office. "You boys got the whole north section reserved. Emma's just finishing setting up your targets." Emma was walking back from the 200-yard line when she heard Brennan's voice carry across the range. "That's our range hand, the quiet girl." "That's her," Bill said. "Best worker I've got." "She doesn't say much, does she?" another SEAL commented. "Nope, but she does her job better than anyone." Emma kept walking, pretending she couldn't hear them. She had learned long ago that the best way to handle being discussed was to act like you weren't listening. She collected her tools and headed toward the equipment shed. "Hey, range girl," Brennan called out. Emma stopped but didn't turn around immediately. She took a slow breath, put on her neutral expression, and turned to face him. "Yes, sir. We're going to be doing some drills today, fast-paced stuff. Think you can handle keeping the targets fresh for us?" "Yes, sir, that's my job." Brennan grinned at his teammates. "Not much of a talker, is she?" Emma didn't respond. She had found that silence was often the best answer to men who were looking for a reaction. "You ever shoot, range girl?" one of the other SEALs asked. He was younger, maybe mid-20s, with red hair and freckles. "Or do you just hang up the targets for the real shooters?" A few of them laughed. Emma felt the familiar tightness in her chest but kept her face blank. "I've shot before," she said quietly. "Oh yeah, what do you shoot? A little .22 pistol?" Brennan asked, grinning. "Whatever needs to be shot," Emma replied. There was something in her tone, just a slight edge, that made Brennan's grin falter for a second, but then he laughed it off. "Well, you just worry about the targets, sweetheart. Leave the shooting to us." Emma nodded and walked away. Behind her, she could hear them laughing and talking as they unpacked their equipment. She had heard it all before. To them, she was just part of the scenery, no more noteworthy than the target stands or the distance markers. And that was fine with Emma. That was exactly what she needed to be. She spent the next 2 hours changing out targets, marking hits, and staying well clear of the firing line while the SEALs ran their drills. They were good shooters, she had to give them that. Fast, accurate, professional. They ran scenarios, practiced shooting on the move, worked on transitioning between weapons. Emma watched from the safety of the equipment shed, her trained eye automatically analyzing their technique. Brennan was fast but sometimes sacrificed accuracy for speed. The red-haired one, she had heard him called Mitchell, had a tendency to anticipate his shots, jerking the trigger slightly. The oldest of the group, a quiet man they called Senior Chief, was the best of them, smooth, controlled, consistent. Not that anyone would ask her opinion, she was just the range hand. At noon, the group took a break. Emma was replacing targets at the 100-yard line when she heard raised voices behind her. She glanced back to see Brennan and Mitchell arguing about something, their voices getting louder. "I'm telling you I can make that shot 9 times out of 10, Brennan was saying. "Bullshit," Mitchell replied. 300 yards, moving target, standing position. You're good, but you're not that good. Want to bet on it? Hell yes, I want to bet on it. $100 says you can't do better than 6 out of 10. Bill had wandered over from the office to watch. Emma finished her work and started walking back, planning to give them a wide berth. But as she passed, Brennan called out to her. "Hey, range girl, come here a second." Emma stopped, every muscle in her body tensing. "Yes, sir." "You're going to be our witness. I'm about to show Mitchell here what real shooting looks like." Brennan picked up his rifle, a high-end AR-15 with expensive optics. "Bill, can you run a moving target at 300 yards? "Sure can," Bill said, heading toward the control panel. Emma stood awkwardly to the side as Brennan set up for his shot. The moving target started sliding across the range at 300 yards, a challenging shot even for experienced shooters. Brennan fired 10 shots in quick succession. When the target was retrieved, he had hit 6 out of 10, exactly what Mitchell had predicted. "6 out of 10, Mitchell crowed. "Pay up, Lieutenant." Brennan scowled. That target was moving faster than regulation speed. "It was regulation speed," Bill called out. "Same as always." "Whatever, 6 out of 10 is still better than you could do," Brennan muttered, digging out his wallet. "Want me to try?" Mitchell asked. "Go ahead, you won't do any better." Mitchell took his position and fired. When his target came back, he had hit 5 out of 10. Brennan laughed triumphantly. "See, I told you." The Senior Chief tried next, managing 7 out of 10. The others took their turns with varying results. The best score remained 7 out of 10. Emma had started to walk away when Brennan's voice stopped her again. "Hey, range girl, you want to try?" She turned slowly. "I'm working, sir." "Come on, take a shot. I want to see what the help can do." His tone was mocking, and she could see the challenge in his eyes. He was bored, looking for entertainment. "I don't think that's a good idea," Emma said quietly. "Why not? You said you've shot before, or were you lying?" Emma felt all their eyes on her. This was exactly the kind of attention she had been avoiding for 8 months. The smart thing to do would be to make an excuse and walk away. But something in Brennan's smirk, in the casual dismissal in his voice, sparked something in Emma that she had been trying to bury for 2 years. "I don't have a rifle with me," she said. Brennan grinned and held out his expensive AR-15. "Use mine, if you can figure out how to work it." Emma looked at the rifle, then at Brennan, then at the other SEALs who were watching with amused expressions. They expected her to embarrass herself. They expected her to miss every shot, to prove that she was exactly what they thought she was, just a range hand who didn't belong in their world. She stepped forward and took the rifle from Brennan's hands. The moment her fingers wrapped around it, something shifted in her. The weight was familiar, comfortable. Her body remembered what her mind had been trying to forget. "Bill, can you run the target again?" she asked, her voice steadier now. "You got it, Emma." Emma walked to the firing line. She didn't rush. She checked the rifle, tested the weight, looked through the scope. She could feel the SEALs watching her, could sense their barely suppressed laughter. The target started moving. Emma's breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. Everything else fell away, the heat, the watching men, the pain of the past 2 years. There was only the rifle, the target, and the space between them. She fired, and fired again, and again. 10 shots, smooth and controlled, each one feeling like a memory her body had kept even when her mind wanted to let go. When the target was retrieved, The range fell completely silent. 10 out of 10. And not just hits, every single shot was within a 2-inch circle in the center of the target. Emma lowered the rifle, her hands beginning to shake now that the moment had passed. She turned to hand it back to Brennan. The lieutenant was staring at her like he had never seen her before. His face had gone pale, and when Emma tried to give him the rifle, he actually took a step backward. "Who the hell are you?" he whispered. Emma's hands were shaking harder now. She had made a terrible mistake. She had revealed herself. She had broken the invisibility that had been her only protection. "I'm just the range hand," she said, setting the rifle down carefully on the bench. "I need to get back to work." She turned and walked away on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. Behind her, she could hear urgent, hushed conversation, but she didn't look back. When she reached the equipment shed, she closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding, her breath coming in short gasps. After 2 years of hiding, 2 years of silence, she had just shown them exactly what she was capable of. And now there would be questions. Questions led to answers, and answers led to the past she had been running from. Emma closed her eyes and tried to breathe through the panic. What had she done? The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety. Emma kept herself busy with tasks that took her far from the SEALs, but she could feel their eyes following her whenever she came into view. The easy laughter and casual conversation from the morning had been replaced by quiet, serious discussion and frequent glances in her direction. At 3 o'clock, the group packed up their gear. Emma was cleaning the brass casings from the far end of the range when she heard footsteps approaching. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. "Emma Clark, right?" The voice belonged to the senior chief, the older SEAL who had been the best shot among them before Emma's demonstration. "Yes, sir," she replied, not stopping her work. "That was some impressive shooting this afternoon." "Thank you, sir. I've been doing this for 23 years. I've trained with some of the best shooters in the world. What you did out there, 10 for 10 on a moving target at 300 yards standing position with an unfamiliar rifle, that's not just impressive. That's exceptional." Emma said nothing. She dumped another scoop of brass into her collection bucket. "So naturally, it makes a man curious," the senior chief continued. "Makes him wonder where a range hand learns to shoot like that." "I practice, sir." "Practice?" The senior chief was quiet for a moment. "Ma'am, I don't mean to pry, but what Lieutenant Brennan did back there, calling you out, mocking you, that was out of line. I apologize on behalf of the team." The unexpected kindness made Emma's throat tighten. "It's fine." "It's not fine, but I appreciate you being gracious about it." He paused. "Can I ask you something?" Emma finally looked up at him. He was in his mid-40s, with gray threading through his dark hair and calm, intelligent eyes. Unlike Brennan's cocky confidence, the senior chief carried himself with quiet authority. "You can ask," Emma said. "I might not answer." A slight smile crossed his face. "Fair enough, were you military?" Emma's hands stilled on the brass scoop. This was the question she had been dreading. "No, sir," she said. "It wasn't technically a lie, not anymore." The senior chief studied her face for a long moment. "Okay," he said finally. "But if you ever want to talk or if any of the guys give you trouble, you let me know. My name's Thomas Garrett. People call me Senior Chief or just Tom." "Thank you, sir." After he left, Emma sat down on an equipment crate and put her head in her hands. She had managed to avoid a direct conversation about her past, but she knew it was only temporary. The SEALs would talk among themselves. They would speculate. Some of them might even try to find out more about her. She needed to be more careful. She needed to fade back into the background, to become invisible again. But even as she thought it, Emma knew it was too late. You couldn't unfire those shots. You couldn't take back a performance like that. That evening after her shift ended, Emma drove to her small apartment in Fallen. It was a modest place, sparsely furnished, just the basics she needed and nothing more. She had learned to live light, to keep everything she owned ready to pack up at a moment's notice. Because running was always an option. It had been her option for 2 years now. She made a simple dinner of pasta and vegetables, ate it standing at the kitchen counter, and then did what she did most nights. Tried not to think about the past and failed completely. The nightmares had gotten better over the past year. There had been a time when she couldn't sleep at all without seeing the blood, hearing the screams, feeling the heat of the explosion. but time and distance had dulled the sharp edges of the memories, even if they hadn't erased them. Tonight, though, the memories were closer to the surface. Holding that rifle had awakened something she had been trying to put to sleep. Emma pulled out her laptop and, against her better judgment, typed a name into the search bar. Captain Emma Jane Clark, United States Marine Corps. The search results were limited. Most of her service record was classified or restricted, but there were a few news articles from 2 years ago, carefully worded to avoid revealing operational details. Marine officer injured in training incident. 2 Marines dead in Nevada accident. Investigation continues into training death. Training incident, accident, the official words that covered up so much truth. Emma closed the laptop and went to her bedroom closet. In the back, hidden behind her civilian clothes, was a box she hadn't opened in months. She pulled it out and sat on the bed, her hands resting on the lid. Inside were the pieces of her old life. Her dress blues uniform, medals and commendations, photos of her team, faces that smiled out at her from a time when everything had made sense, when she had known exactly who she was and what she was meant to do. At the bottom of the box was her discharge paperwork. Medical discharge, honorable, the words that had ended her career and her identity all at once. There was also a letter, sealed in an envelope that she had never opened. It had arrived a month after the incident, forwarded from her last duty station. The return address was from the Marine Corps headquarters, but it was marked personal and confidential. Emma had carried it with her through 2 years and 4 different cities, but she had never found the courage to open it. She put everything back in the box except for one photo, a picture of her platoon in Afghanistan, taken during her second deployment. She had been a first lieutenant then, young and confident, standing among her Marines with the kind of smile that came from knowing you were exactly where you belonged. The woman in that photo seemed like a stranger now. Emma set the photo on her nightstand and lay down, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow she would go back to work, keep her head down, and hope that the SEALs would lose interest in her. She would be the quiet range hand again, invisible and unremarkable. But deep down, she knew something had changed. The box had been opened, literally and figuratively, and she wasn't sure she could close it again. The next morning, Emma arrived at the range at 6:30, even earlier than usual. She wanted to get the day's prep work done before anyone else showed up, to avoid any awkward conversations or probing questions. But when she pulled into the parking lot, Bill's truck was already there, and there was another vehicle beside it, a black SUV with government plates. Emma's stomach dropped. She sat in her car for a moment, considering whether to drive away. But running now would only make things worse. Whatever this was, she needed to face it. She found Bill in the office, looking uncomfortable. With him were 2 people Emma didn't recognize. A man in his 50s wearing a naval officer's uniform with commander's stripes, and a woman in civilian clothes who had the unmistakable bearing of military or law enforcement. "Emma," Bill said, relief evident in his voice. "These folks want to talk to you. I told them they should wait until you got here." The commander stepped forward and extended his hand. "Ms. Clark, I'm Commander Michael Hastings from Naval Special Warfare Command. This is Agent Lisa Reeves from NCIS. We were hoping we could have a few minutes of your time." NCIS, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Emma felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her face neutral as she shook his hand. "What's this about, sir?" "It's about your performance on the range yesterday," Commander Hastings said. "Several of our personnel witnessed your shooting demonstration. They filed reports that, well, frankly, they found your skill level unusual for a civilian range employee." "I'm a good shot," Emma said carefully. "That's not a crime." "No, it's not," Agent Reeves spoke for the first time. Her voice was professional but not unkind. "But it did raise some questions. We ran a background check." Of course they did. Emma forced herself to breathe normally. "And?" she asked. Commander Hastings glanced at Bill, who took the hint and stepped outside, closing the office door behind him. "Ms. Clark," the commander said, "we know who you are, or rather who you were. Captain Emma Clark, USMC. Scout Sniper Platoon Commander, 2 deployments to Afghanistan, multiple commendations, and then a medical discharge 2 years ago following an incident at the Mountain Warfare Training Center." Emma said nothing. What was there to say? Agent Reeves pulled out a folder and opened it. "The official report says training accident. 2 Marines killed, several others injured. You were among the injured, psychological trauma, diagnosed with severe PTSD. You were treated at Bethesda Naval Hospital for 6 months before being medically discharged. I know my own history, Emma said quietly. Then you know that the incident is still under periodic review, Agent Reeves said. There were questions about what really happened that day, questions that were never fully answered. Emma felt ice forming in her chest. The investigation was closed. I cooperated fully. I told them everything I knew. Yes, you did, Commander Hastings said. But here's the thing, Captain Clark. I'm not a captain anymore, Emma interrupted. I'm just Emma Clark, civilian. Fair enough. Ms. Clark, we're not here to reopen old wounds or reinvestigate the incident. We're here because we need your help. That was not what Emma had expected to hear. My help with what? Commander Hastings and Agent Reeves exchanged a glance. Then the commander spoke. We have a situation. A Navy SEAL team operator went missing 3 days ago during a training exercise in the mountains north of here. We've been conducting a search and rescue operation, but the terrain is difficult and time is running out. I'm sorry to hear that, Emma said, but I don't understand what that has to do with me. The missing operator is Petty Officer First Class Rebecca Torres, Agent Reeves said. She's part of the 1st Integrated Female SEAL Team, and the area where she went missing. It's the same area where your incident occurred 2 years ago, the Mountain Warfare Training Center. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. The mountains, the training center, the place where everything had gone wrong. No, she said immediately, I can't help you. Ms. Clark. I said no, I haven't been back there since. I can't. Commander Hastings's voice softened. Captain Emma, I understand this is difficult, but Petty Officer Torres has been missing for 72 hours in harsh terrain. The search teams haven't been able to locate her, and the weather window is closing. We need someone who knows those mountains, who understands the terrain. There are plenty of people who know those mountains, Emma said. But none of them are you, the commander replied. I've read your file, the unredacted parts at least. You were one of the best wilderness trackers the Marines had. You led rescue operations in Afghanistan that saved dozens of lives, and you know that specific area better than anyone. Emma was shaking her head before he finished. That was a different person. That was before. Before the incident, I know. Commander Hastings pulled out a photo and placed it on the desk. It showed a young woman in Navy fatigues smiling at the camera. She looked barely old enough to be in the military. This is Petty Officer Torres. She's 25 years old. She has a mother and 2 younger sisters who are praying for her safe return, and right now you might be her best chance. Emma stared at the photo, feeling the walls of the small office closing in on her. They were asking her to go back to the place that haunted her nightmares. They were asking her to be the person she used to be, the capable officer who could handle anything. But that person had died in those mountains 2 years ago, along with 2 of her Marines. I need to think about this, Emma said. We don't have much time, Agent Reeves said. Every hour that passes. I said I need to think about it. Emma's voice rose, and she immediately regretted it. She took a breath. I'm sorry, but I can't make this decision right now. I need some time. Commander Hastings studied her for a moment, then nodded. You have until this evening. We're assembling a search team to go out at first light tomorrow. If you decide to help, we'll brief you at 1800 hours at the Naval Air Station. If you don't come, we'll understand, and this conversation stays confidential. He handed her a card with a phone number. Call me either way, please, even if it's just to say no. After they left, Emma sat alone in the office, staring at the photo of Petty Officer Torres. 25 years old, just a few years younger than some of the Marines Emma had led. Bill knocked softly and poked his head in. You okay, kid? I don't know, Emma admitted. Want to talk about it? Not really. Bill nodded. Fair enough, take the day off if you need it. I can handle things here. But Emma shook her head. She needed to work, needed to keep moving, needed to not think about the decision she was facing. The day passed in a mechanical blur. Emma went through her tasks robotically, her mind elsewhere. She kept seeing the photo of the young SEAL, kept imagining her alone in those mountains, injured or lost or worse. She also kept seeing other faces, the faces of the 2 Marines who had died, the faces that visited her in nightmares. At 5 o'clock, Emma's shift ended. She sat in her car in the parking lot, the commander's card in her hand, staring at her phone. One call could send her back to the mountains, back to the trauma she had been running from for 2 years. One call could force her to face everything she had been avoiding. But one call might also save a young woman's life. Emma thought about her father, who had been a Marine before her. He had always told her that being a Marine wasn't about never being afraid. It was about doing your duty even when you were terrified. She thought about the oath she had taken when she was commissioned. I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. She thought about Petty Officer Rebecca Torres, 25 years old, alone in the mountains. With shaking hands, Emma dialed the number. Commander Hastings answered on the first ring. Commander Hastings. It's Emma Clark, she said. I'll help you find her. The briefing room at Naval Air Station Fallon was filled with grim faces. Emma sat near the back, feeling like an imposter among the SEALs, search and rescue specialists, and command staff assembled for the mission brief. She wore her old hiking boots and field pants, pulled from storage that afternoon. They still fit, but they felt like someone else's clothes. Commander Hastings stood at the front of the room beside a topographical map of the mountain range. Listen up, people. We're now at hour 75 of this search. Petty Officer Torres was conducting a solo navigation exercise as part of her advanced mountain warfare qualification when she failed to check in at her 1800 rendezvous point. Her emergency beacon activated briefly at 2200 that night, but went offline after approximately 30 seconds. We've had teams searching the area around that beacon location for the past 3 days with no results. He gestured to the map, where a red circle marked the last known location. Emma felt her stomach tighten. The circle was less than 5 miles from where her own incident had occurred. Weather conditions have been our enemy, Hastings continued. We've had snow, high winds, and limited visibility. The window we have tomorrow is narrow, maybe 8 hours of decent conditions before another storm system moves in. If we don't find her tomorrow, we'll have to suspend the search until the weather clears, and that could be days. A tall SEAL raised his hand. Sir, what makes us think tomorrow will be any different from the past 3 days? We've had experienced teams combing that area. Hastings nodded toward Emma. That's where our consultant comes in. Most of you don't know her, but this is Emma Clark. She's former Marine Corps, and she has extensive experience in this specific mountain range. She's going to be advising the search effort. Emma felt every eye in the room turn to her. She kept her face neutral, but her hands were clenched in her lap. A woman in Navy fatigues stood up from the front row. She was tall, athletic, with short black hair and intense dark eyes. With all due respect, sir, I'm familiar with most of the Marine Corps mountain warfare instructors, and I don't know this name. What's her qualification? Lieutenant Chen, this is not open for debate, Hastings said firmly. Ms. Clark has agreed to help us, and I expect everyone to cooperate fully with her recommendations. Lieutenant Chen looked like she wanted to argue, but sat down without another word. After the briefing, as people filed out to prepare gear, Emma found herself cornered by Lieutenant Chen and 2 other SEALs. I don't know who you are or what strings you pulled to get into this operation, Chen said quietly, but Petty Officer Torres is one of mine. If your inexperience gets in the way of finding her, you and I are going to have a problem. Emma met her eyes steadily. I'm here to help find her, Lieutenant, same as you. Are you? Because I've never heard of you, and I've trained with every major mountain warfare unit in the Corps. So either you're not as qualified as the commander thinks, or there's something else going on here. One of the SEALs with Chen, Emma recognized him as Mitchell from the range, spoke up. Lieutenant, this is the woman I told you about, the range hand who made that impossible shot. Chen's expression shifted slightly, from hostility to reassessment. You're the one who went 10 for 10 on the moving target. Yes, ma'am. And you're former Marine Corps. Yes, ma'am. Chen studied her for a long moment. What's your real story, Ms. Clark? Emma could feel the walls closing in again. But before she could answer, a familiar voice spoke from behind her. She's the real deal, Lieutenant. Senior Chief Tom Garrett stepped into the circle. I did some asking around after yesterday. Captain Emma Clark, former Scout Sniper Platoon Commander, 2 combat deployments, multiple commendations for actions in Afghanistan. She led a rescue operation in the Korangal Valley that pulled out 12 wounded Marines under heavy fire. She's qualified. Emma shot him a look that was part gratitude, part frustration. He had just revealed more than she wanted these people to know. Chen's hostility had transformed into confusion. If you have that kind of background, why are you working as a range hand? And why didn't you say something yesterday when Brennan was mocking you? Because what I used to be doesn't matter anymore, Emma said quietly. I'm here now because there's a missing sailor who needs to be found. Can we focus on that, please? After a moment, Chen nodded. Fair enough, but if we're going into those mountains together, I need to know you can handle it. Can you? Emma wanted to say yes. She wanted to be confident. But she had learned in therapy that honesty, especially about your limitations, was important. I don't know, she admitted, but I'm going to try. The answer seemed to satisfy Chen more than false bravado would have. She extended her hand. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, Tors is my teammate and my friend. Help me find her and we're good. Emma shook her hand. I'll do everything I can. The search team assembled at 500 the next morning. 8 people. Commander Hastings, Lieutenant Chen, Senior Chief Garrett, 2 other SEALs, 2 search and rescue specialists, and Emma. They loaded into 2 helicopters as dawn began to break over the Nevada mountains. Emma sat in silence during the flight, watching the familiar terrain roll past below. These mountains held 3 years of memories, 2 years of training exercises and confidence, and then one terrible day that had shattered everything. The helicopters landed at a clearing about 2 miles from the last known beacon location. As the team unloaded gear, Emma studied the landscape with a trained eye. Snow covered the ground, and the wind was bitter and sharp. Ms. Clark, Commander Hastings called. You're up, where do we start? Emma pulled out the map and oriented herself. The search teams had been focusing on a specific area around the beacon location, but something about it didn't feel right to Emma. Show me exactly where the other teams have searched, she said. One of the SAR specialists, a Navy chief named Rodriguez, pointed out the areas on the map. They had covered the most logical routes, the places where someone following standard navigation would travel. But Emma knew from experience that when things went wrong in the mountains, logic often went out the window. The beacon activated here, Emma said, pointing to the mark on the map. But it only transmitted for 30 seconds. Why? Equipment failure, Rodriguez suggested. Maybe, or maybe she activated it manually, and then had to turn it off or move quickly. Why would she do that? Chen asked. Emma studied the terrain. Because she was in danger and didn't want to be tracked, or because she fell and the beacon activated on impact, but she was unconscious or injured and couldn't keep it on. If she's unconscious, she could be anywhere, one of the SEALs said. Not anywhere, Emma said slowly, her mind working through the possibilities. Look at the terrain. If she was following the planned route and something went wrong here. She traced a line on the map. There's a ravine system that runs parallel to the main trail. It's not visible from above because of the tree cover, if she fell or if she was running from something and lost her footing. The search teams checked the ravines, Rodriguez said. Did they go down into them, or did they just look from the rim? Rodriguez hesitated. I'd have to check the reports. We go down, Emma said with sudden certainty. That's where she is. Commander Hastings looked at the map, then at Emma. You're sure? No, sir, but it's what I would do if I were trying to survive in these mountains. Get low, get out of the wind, find cover. That's sound reasoning, Senior Chief Garrett said, and it's terrain the aerial searches would have missed. All right, Hastings decided. We split into 2 teams. Chen, you take Garrett and Jackson and search the northern ravine system. I'll take Rodriguez, Mitchell, and Clark for the southern section. We meet back at the LZ at 1500 unless someone finds something. The teams separated, and Emma found herself hiking through the snowy forest with Commander Hastings, Rodriguez, and Mitchell. The physical exertion felt good. It gave her something to focus on besides the memories that pressed in from every direction. They reached the ravine system after an hour of hiking. Emma approached the edge carefully and looked down into the steep-sided gorge. It was about 40 feet deep, choked with fallen trees and snow-covered rocks. That's a nasty fall, Mitchell observed. It is, Emma agreed. But there's cover down there, protection from the wind. If I were injured and trying to stay alive, that's where I'd be. How do we get down? Rodriguez asked. Emma was already pulling rope from her pack. We rappel, I'll go first. Ms. Clark, with all due respect, maybe one of us should, Hastings began. I know this terrain, Commander, and I know what to look for. Emma was already rigging the rope around a sturdy tree. Her hands remembered the motions even though it had been 2 years since she had done this. She went over the edge before her fear could catch up with her rational mind. The descent was tricky, the rock face was icy and unstable. Emma's boots slipped twice, and once she swung hard into the wall, jarring her shoulder. But she made it to the bottom and unclipped from the rope. The ravine floor was a chaotic jumble of rocks, fallen trees, and deep snow. Emma began searching methodically, looking for any sign of disturbance, any indication that someone had been here. Anything, Hastings called from above. Still looking, Emma shouted back. She worked her way deeper into the ravine, stepping carefully over obstacles. The space was narrow here, barely wide enough for one person, and the walls rose high on either side. Very little light penetrated through the tree cover above. Emma was about to call up that this section was clear when she saw it, a scrap of fabric caught on a broken branch. It was olive drab, the same color as Navy field uniforms. Her heart began to race. I've got something. She moved faster now, following the ravine as it curved to the left, and then she saw her. Petty Officer Rebecca Torres was wedged between 2 large rocks, partially covered by snow. She wasn't moving. I found her, Emma yelled. Get a medic down here now. Emma scrambled over the rocks to reach Torres. She wasn't dressed nearly warm enough for the cold, having expected a simple day navigation exercise. Emma could see blood on the rocks. Torres had been injured in the fall. With trembling hands, Emma checked for a pulse. They're faint, but there. She's alive, Emma shouted. But she's hypothermic. I need blankets, heat packs, medical supplies. Emma shrugged out of her own jacket and wrapped it around Torres, then pulled the unconscious woman close to share body heat. Stay with me, she murmured. You're going to be okay. We've got you. Above, she could hear the team springing into action. Rodriguez rappelled down with a medical pack, followed quickly by Mitchell with emergency blankets and heating packs. How is she? Rodriguez asked, already checking vital signs. Pulse is weak, breathing is shallow. Looks like she's been here a while. Emma helped Rodriguez work, her training kicking in automatically. They wrapped Torres in emergency blankets and activated chemical heat packs, tucking them around her body. Rodriguez started an IV to get fluids into her system. We need to get her out of here and to a hospital, Rodriguez said, but moving her in this condition, in this terrain. We have to try, Emma said. She won't survive another night out here. Commander Hastings had called in a helicopter, but the ravine was too narrow for aerial extraction. They would have to carry Torres out the hard way. It took all 4 of them to rig a litter and carefully move Torres through the ravine to a point where they could lift her out. Every movement had to be precise. One slip could send them all tumbling down the rocky slope. Emma worked alongside the others, her body running on adrenaline and muscle memory. She had done this before in Afghanistan, carrying wounded Marines across hostile terrain. Her hands knew what to do even when her mind was overwhelmed. It took 2 hours to get Torres out of the ravine and to a clearing where the helicopter could land. Lieutenant Chen's team had returned and helped with the final transport. As the helicopter lifted off with Torres and Rodriguez aboard, the remaining team members stood in exhausted silence. Chen turned to Emma. You found her, you knew exactly where to look. Emma was shaking now, the adrenaline draining away and leaving her hollow. I understood what she would do, where she would go. It was more than that, Hastings said. It was instinct, experience. You read the terrain like a book. Emma couldn't respond. All she could think about was how easily it could have ended differently. How they might have been carrying out a body instead of an unconscious but living woman. Senior Chief Garrett appeared at her side and handed her a water bottle. You did good, Captain. Don't call me that, Emma said automatically. Why not? That's what you are. What you've always been, whether you're wearing the uniform or not. Emma took a long drink of water, trying to steady herself. We should head back. The hike back to the landing zone was quiet. Emma walked in a daze, her mind disconnected from her body. She had done it. She had gone back to the mountains, faced her fears, and helped save a life. But she had also opened a door she had been keeping firmly closed, and she could feel the memories pressing through, demanding to be acknowledged. By the time they reached the helicopters, Emma was barely holding herself together. She climbed aboard and strapped in, keeping her eyes closed for the flight back. When they landed at the Naval Air Station, Commander Hastings pulled her aside. "Ms. Clark, I can't thank you enough. Petty Officer Torres is alive because of you." "Is there any word on her condition?" Emma asked. "She's at the hospital now. They're treating her for hypothermia, a broken leg, and a concussion, but the doctors say she'll make a full recovery." Emma nodded, relief flooding through her. "There's something else," Hastings said. "What you did today, the way you read that terrain and found her when our trained teams couldn't, that's a rare skill. We could use someone like you. The Navy is expanding our mountain warfare program, and we need instructors who—" "No," Emma interrupted. "I'm sorry, Commander, but no. I did what I came here to do, but I can't. I'm not ready to be that person again." Hastings looked disappointed but nodded. "I understand, but if you ever change your mind, the door is open." Emma drove home in silence, her mind numb. She had saved a life today. She had proven to herself that she still had the skills, the instincts. But she had also proven something else. That going back to that world, even for a day, brought all the pain and trauma rushing back with overwhelming force. That night, the nightmares returned worse than they had been in months. Emma called in sick to work for the first time in 8 months. She couldn't face the range, couldn't face the possibility of running into the SEALs who had been on the rescue mission. She spent the day in her apartment, blinds drawn, trying to quiet the memories that yesterday's mountain excursion had awakened. But on the third day, Bill called her. "Emma, I'm not trying to pressure you, but I need to know if you're coming back," he said, his voice gentle. "And more importantly, I need to know if you're okay." "I don't know," Emma admitted, to either question. "Fair enough, but there's some people here who'd like to see you. I told them you weren't here, but they said they'd wait." "Who?" "The Lady SEAL, Lieutenant Chen, I think, and that older guy, the senior chief. They've been here since opening, sitting in the parking lot. They said they need to talk to you." Emma felt a mix of anxiety and curiosity. Tell them I'll be there in an hour." She showered, dressed, and forced herself to eat something before making the drive to the range. Chen's truck and Garrett's SUV were indeed in the parking lot. They got out when they saw Emma's car pull up. "Ms. Clark," Chen said, "thank you for seeing us." "You've been waiting 3 hours in a parking lot," Emma replied. "Seemed like I should at least hear what you have to say." "Can we talk somewhere private?" Garrett asked. They ended up in Bill's office. Bill made himself scarce, leaving Emma alone with the 2 SEALs. "First," Chen said, "I wanted to thank you personally. Torres is awake. She's going to be fine because of you. They're releasing her from the hospital tomorrow." "I'm glad," Emma said sincerely. "She wants to meet you to thank you herself," Chen continued. "But there's something else, something we need to tell you, and it's not easy." Emma felt ice forming in her stomach. "What is it?" Garrett pulled out a folder. "After the rescue, Commander Hastings authorized me to access the full classified report on your incident 2 years ago, the one at the Mountain Warfare Training Center." "Why?" Emma's voice was sharp. "Because something Torres said when she woke up didn't make sense. She said she saw something in the mountains, something that made her deviate from her route. And when I read what happened to you, I saw similarities that couldn't be coincidence." Emma stood up. "I don't want to talk about this." "Emma, please," Chen said. "Just listen. 2 years ago, you were leading a training exercise with your Marine platoon, 12 Marines, including yourself. You were conducting mountain warfare training in the same area where Torres went missing, and something went wrong." "I know what happened," Emma said, her voice breaking. "I was there." "But did you know the official investigation found inconsistencies in the evidence?" Garrett asked quietly. "Did you know that the incident was flagged for further review, but then suddenly closed without explanation?" Emma sat back down slowly. "What are you talking about?" Garrett opened the file. "According to the official report, your training exercise encountered unexpected severe weather. 2 Marines, Corporal David Matthews and Lance Corporal Jennifer Brooks, fell while attempting to navigate a difficult ridgeline. You and the rest of the platoon attempted a rescue, but by the time you reached them, both were deceased." "I know," Emma whispered. "I remember every detail." "But here's what doesn't add up," Garrett continued. The weather reports from that day show conditions that were challenging but not severe, certainly not bad enough to cause experienced Marines to fall. And the location where they fell, according to your statement, it was an unexpected drop-off that wasn't marked on the maps. That's right, Emma said. We had been using those maps for weeks. The drop-off wasn't there before. We thought maybe there had been a landslide or erosion, but the geological survey done afterward found no evidence of recent ground movement, Chen finished. The terrain had been stable for years. Emma felt dizzy. What are you saying? We're saying that something else was going on in those mountains, Garrett said. Something that. She was just a range hand setting targets, until a SEAL handed over his rifle and backed away. Claude Sonnet 4-5-20,250,920, 9 thinking 32K. Thought for 9 seconds. The colonel dismissed the girl's firing range request. Then she outshot every SEAL team marksman. Sarah Mitchell stood at attention outside Colonel Henderson's office at the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California. The morning sun blazed through the windows of the administrative building, but Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had been waiting for 20 minutes, watching officers walk past, some giving her curious looks, others ignoring her completely. She was used to being ignored. At 5'4" and barely 120 pounds, Sarah didn't look like the typical soldier. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her uniform was pressed to perfection, but she knew what people saw when they looked at her. A girl playing dress-up in a world built for men. "The colonel will see you now," the assistant said, barely looking up from his computer. Sarah entered the office and saluted. Colonel James Henderson was a mountain of a man, with silver hair cut military short and a chest full of medals that told stories of wars and missions she could only imagine. He didn't return her salute right away. Instead, he looked her up and down with an expression that Sarah had seen too many times before, dismissal mixed with barely concealed annoyance. "At ease, Corporal Mitchell," he finally said, returning her salute with a lazy wave. "What can I do for you?" Sarah had practiced this moment 100 times. "Sir, I'm requesting permission to qualify on the SEAL team training range. I've been assigned to support operations for Team 3, and I believe—" "Stop right there," Colonel Henderson interrupted, leaning back in his chair with a sound that was almost a laugh. "The SEAL range? You do know that's for SEAL team members and special operations personnel only, don't you?" "Yes, sir, I understand that. But the regulation states that support personnel who may be deployed in combat zones alongside special operations forces can request." "I know what the regulation states, Corporal. I wrote half of them." The colonel picked up a pen and tapped it against his desk. "Let me ask you something. Do you know what those men train for? Do you have any idea what it takes to even step foot on that range?" Sarah kept her voice steady. "I believe I do, sir." "You believe?" Colonel Henderson shook his head. "Listen, Corporal Mitchell, I'm sure you're very good at whatever it is you do. Logistics, administrative work, communications, those are all important jobs, but the SEAL training range is not a place for—" He caught himself, but Sarah knew what he was about to say. Not a place for women, not a place for someone like her. "With respect, sir, I'm a qualified expert marksman. I've held that rating for 3 years. I'm not asking to join the SEAL teams. I'm asking to qualify on a range that I may need to be familiar with as part of my duties." Colonel Henderson sighed like a parent dealing with a stubborn child. "Request denied, Corporal. You're dismissed." Sarah felt heat rising in her chest, but she kept her face neutral. "Sir, may I ask the reason for the denial?" "The reason?" The colonel's voice took on an edge. "The reason is that I have SEAL team operators training on that range, real warriors who need to focus on real training. I don't have time to babysit support staff who want to play soldier. That range is not a tourist attraction. Now you're dismissed. That's an order." Sarah saluted, turned on her heel, and walked out of the office with her head high. But inside, she was burning. Not just with anger, but with something deeper. A familiar pain that reached back through years of being told she wasn't good enough, wasn't strong enough, didn't belong. Outside the building, she found a bench in the shade and sat down, letting out a long breath. The naval base sprawled around her, alive with activity. She could hear the ocean in the distance and the sound of helicopters overhead. Somewhere on this base, SEAL team operators were training, pushing themselves to impossible limits, and she had just been told she wasn't worthy to even try. "Rough meeting." Sarah looked up to see Captain Rodriguez, one of the few female officers on base. She was in her 40s, with kind eyes and the weathered look of someone who had fought plenty of battles, both on the field and in conference rooms. "That obvious?" Sarah asked. Captain Rodriguez sat down beside her. "Let me guess. Henderson shut you down before you even finished your request." "How did you know?" "Because he's done it to every woman who's walked into his office for the past 10 years. He's old school and not in the good way." Captain Rodriguez looked out toward the training grounds. "What were you asking for?" "Range qualification. I'm supporting SEAL Team 3 on their next deployment. I just wanted to be prepared." "And he said no because?" "Because he thinks I'm playing soldier." Sarah's voice was bitter despite her attempt to control it. Captain Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "Can I give you some advice, Sarah?" "Yes, ma'am." "Men like Henderson only understand one language: results. You can argue regulations all day, but it won't change his mind. You want access to that range? You're going to have to prove you deserve it in a way he can't ignore." "How am I supposed to do that if he won't even give me a chance?" "That's the question, isn't it?" Captain Rodriguez stood up. "But if anyone can figure it out, I think you can. I've seen your file, Corporal Mitchell. Expert marksman rating 3 years running. That's not easy to achieve." After Captain Rodriguez left, Sarah sat alone, watching the base move around her. Somewhere deep inside, a plan was beginning to form. It was risky, maybe even career-ending if it went wrong. But she was tired of being dismissed, tired of being told she didn't belong. She thought about her father, about the promises she had made, about why she had joined the military in the first place. This wasn't just about proving herself to Colonel Henderson. This was about proving something to herself. Sarah stood up and squared her shoulders. If the colonel wanted to see results, then she would give him results he couldn't ignore. But first, she needed to find a way onto that range, invitation or not. The dining hall at the Naval Special Warfare Center buzzed with conversation and the clatter of trays. Sarah sat alone at a corner table, picking at her food while reviewing training manuals on her tablet. She had learned early in her career that lunch was often better spent in solitude than trying to break into the tight circles of men who saw her as an outsider. "Hey, isn't that the girl who tried to get on the SEAL range?" The voice was loud enough to be heard over the general noise and clearly meant to be. Sarah didn't look up, but she felt the familiar tightness in her chest. No way. What did she think was going to happen? Laughter followed. Sarah kept her eyes on her tablet, her jaw clenched. A tray slammed down on the table across from her. She looked up to see Petty Officer First Class Marcus Webb, one of the SEAL Team 3 members she was supposed to support on the upcoming deployment. He was a tall man with the kind of build that came from years of intense training and a smirk that seemed permanently fixed on his face. "So it's true," Webb said, not bothering to sit. "Little Corporal Mitchell wants to shoot with the big boys." 2 other SEAL operators appeared behind him, both grinning. Sarah recognized them from briefings, Petty Officers Drake and Morrison. They were younger than Webb but carried the same swagger. "I requested a range qualification," Sarah said evenly. "Same as any other support personnel assigned to combat deployment." "Support personnel?" Webb repeated, making the words sound like an insult. "You know what that means, right? You stay back at base, file reports, make sure our gear gets where it needs to go. You don't need to shoot, you need to type." Drake laughed. "Come on, Webb, maybe she's really good. Maybe she shoots at paper targets on weekends." "With a little pink pistol," Morrison added. Sarah felt the eyes of the dining hall on her. This was a test, she knew. How she responded would determine how these men treated her for the entire deployment. She could file a complaint, but that would only make things worse. She could stay quiet and take it, but that would mark her as weak. Instead, she looked Webb directly in the eye. "You're right, Petty Officer Webb. I do shoot paper targets, and I've been doing it long enough to put every round through the same hole at 300 yards. Can you say the same?" The smirk faltered on Webb's face for just a second. Big talk from someone who's never been in combat. "And you know that how?" Sarah asked quietly. The truth was, Sarah had deployed twice, both times to Afghanistan. She had never fired her weapon in anger, but she had been under fire. She had seen friends wounded and carried the weight of war in ways that never made it into official records. But she had learned that men like Webb never asked about your experience. They only saw what they wanted to see. Webb leaned across the table. You want to prove something, Corporal? Fine. Tomorrow, there's an informal shoot at the public range outside base. Some of the guys from Team 3 get together, blow off steam. Why don't you show up and show us what you've got? It was a trap, and Sarah knew it. Show up and fail, and they would mock her forever. Show up and succeed, and they would find another reason to dismiss her. Don't show up, and she would be marked as all talk. What time? She asked. 0800, bring your own weapon and ammo. Webb straightened up, his smirk returning. Unless you're scared. I'll be there. After they left, Sarah sat alone again, her appetite gone. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she pressed them flat against the table. She had just committed to facing off against SEAL team operators, men who trained with weapons for a living. What had she been thinking? That night, Sarah returned to her small apartment off base. It was a sparse place, just a bedroom, bathroom, and kitchenette, but it was hers. She unlocked the safe in her closet and pulled out her rifle case. Inside was a Remington 700, a bolt-action rifle that had belonged to her father. She ran her hands over the smooth wood stock, feeling the familiar grain under her fingers. This rifle had taught her everything she knew about shooting. Sarah's father, Master Sergeant Robert Mitchell, had been a Marine Corps scout sniper. He had trained her from the age of 12, taking her to ranges across the country, teaching her not just how to shoot, but how to read wind, judge distance, control her breathing and her heartbeat. Shooting wasn't just a skill for Sarah. It was a language she had spoken with her father, a bond that went deeper than words. He had died 6 years ago during her second year in the Army, a training accident, sudden and senseless. Sarah had scattered his ashes at his favorite range in Montana, and she had made him a promise that day. She would be the best, not to prove anything to anyone else, but to honor what he had taught her. Now, holding his rifle, she felt that promise weighing on her. She spent the next 3 hours cleaning and checking every part of the weapon, though it was already in perfect condition. It was meditation as much as maintenance. With each pass of the cleaning cloth, her breathing steadied. Her doubt transformed into focus. At midnight, she finally put the rifle away and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be difficult. Webb and his team would be skilled, confident, and they would be shooting to humiliate her. But Sarah had something they didn't expect. She had been underestimated her entire life, and she had learned to turn that underestimation into an advantage. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the civilian range 15 minutes early. It was a sprawling facility outside Coronado, with multiple bays for rifle and pistol shooting. She paid her fee and set up at the rifle range, laying out her equipment with careful precision. By the time Webb and his crew arrived, she was ready. There were 7 of them in total, all SEAL team operators, all carrying expensive tactical rifles with high-end optics. They saw her standing there with her old-fashioned bolt-action rifle and burst into laughter. "Is that a museum piece?" Drake called out. "My grandfather had one of those," Morrison added. Webb walked over, looking at her rifle with exaggerated interest. "Corporal Mitchell, this is a shooting competition, not a historical reenactment. You know that, right?" Sarah smiled. "This rifle can shoot. The question is, can you?" Webb's expression shifted from amusement to something harder. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a woman half his size with a rifle older than she was. "All right, Corporal," he said slowly. "Since you're so confident, let's make this interesting. We'll do 3 rounds. Pistol at 25 yards, rifle at 100 yards, and rifle at 300 yards. Best combined score wins." "And what does the winner get?" Sarah asked. Webb grinned. "When I win, you admit that you don't belong anywhere near SEAL team operations, and you request a transfer to a nice, safe desk job." The other operators hooted and whistled. Sarah felt her heart pounding, but she kept her face calm. "And when I win?" she asked. "If you win," Webb said, emphasizing the if, "I'll personally talk to Colonel Henderson and tell him you deserve a shot at range qualification." Sarah knew it was a long shot. Even if she won, there was no guarantee Webb would keep his word. But this wasn't really about Webb anymore. This was about standing her ground, about refusing to back down. "Deal," she said, extending her hand. Webb shook it, squeezing harder than necessary. Sarah didn't flinch. The range officer set up the first course of fire, pistol shooting at 25 yards, 5 rounds, timed. Webb went first, drawing his Sig Sauer P226 with the practiced ease of someone who had done this thousands of times. His shots rang out in quick succession. When the target came back, 4 hits in the center ring, 1 just outside. Solid shooting. The other operators clapped and congratulated him. Sarah stepped up to the line with her Beretta M9, standard military issue. She had practiced with this pistol countless times, but it felt different with all eyes on her, with everything riding on her performance. She thought of her father's voice, "Don't shoot fast, shoot smooth. Smooth is fast enough." She drew a breath, let it out halfway, and began to fire. 5 shots, each one feeling like an eternity and an instant at once. When the target came back, all 5 rounds were in the center ring, clustered so tight they almost looked like 3 shots. Silence fell over the range. Webb stared at the target, then at Sarah. "Lucky," he muttered. But his voice lacked conviction. The other operators shot next. Drake managed 4 center hits and 1 outside. Morrison got 3 and 2. The rest performed similarly, good shooting but nothing exceptional. The rifle round at 100 yards was next. This was where the SEAL operators expected to dominate. They brought out their tactical rifles, all equipped with magnified optics and bipods. These were weapons designed for precision, tools of professional warriors. Webb shot first again, taking his time to set up. He was being more careful now, Sarah noticed. Her pistol performance had shaken his confidence. His shots were excellent, all 5 in the center with a group size of about 2 inches. The operators cheered, and Webb looked at Sarah with renewed confidence. "Beat that with your antique," he said. Sarah set up her father's rifle on the bench, settling the stock against her shoulder like greeting an old friend. She had no bipod, no fancy optic, just a simple fixed-power scope and the fundamentals her father had drilled into her. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering a day when she was 15. She had been frustrated, missing shots, ready to give up. Her father had sat beside her on the range bench and said, "Sarah, the rifle doesn't miss. You miss. But you can learn not to. You can learn to be so still inside that nothing shakes you. That's the real skill." She opened her eyes and began to shoot. The bolt-action rifle required her to manually cycle each round, breaking her position slightly between shots. It was slower than the semi-automatic rifles the operators used, but it had an advantage they didn't understand. It made her more deliberate, more focused on each individual shot. When her target came back, there was a moment of stunned silence, and then someone whispered, "No way." All 5 shots had struck within an inch of each other, forming a group smaller than a quarter in the exact center of the target. "She's got to be cheating somehow," Morrison said, but even he didn't sound convinced. Webb said nothing. He just stared at the target, his jaw tight. The other operators shot, and while their shooting was good, none of them matched Sarah's precision. Drake came close with a 2-inch group, but it was still twice the size of Sarah's. After all the operators had finished, Webb tallied the scores. Sarah was ahead by a significant margin. The final round, 300 yards, would decide everything. "This is where we separate the tourists from the professionals," Webb announced, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. 300 yards, wind is picking up. This is real shooting." He was right about the wind. Sarah could feel it gusting across the range, pushing from the left, variable and unpredictable. At 300 yards, even a slight wind could push a bullet several inches off target. The SEAL operators set up their shots with care, using wind meters and range finders, making calculations and adjustments to their scopes. This was the kind of shooting they had trained for in sniper schools and advanced marksmanship courses. Webb shot first, taking nearly 10 minutes to fire his 5 rounds. When his target came back, his group was still impressive, all 5 hits within a 4-inch circle, well centered. He had read the wind correctly and made good shots. The other operators followed. Most managed to keep their groups in a 6 to 8-inch circle, which was excellent shooting at that distance in the wind. 1 or 2 had flyers that opened their groups up to 10 or 12 inches. Then it was Sarah's turn. She settled into position behind her rifle, feeling the wind on her face. 300 yards was not an easy distance, especially with iron sights and a simple scope. The SEAL operators had every technological advantage, but Sarah had something else. She remembered her father teaching her to read wind not with instruments but with feel, watching the grass move, the trees sway, feeling the push against her skin. "Technology fails," he had told her. "Your senses don't, trust them." She aimed at the target, made her adjustment, and fired her first shot. The recoil of the rifle, the sound of the report, the smell of gunpowder, it all felt like home. She cycled the bolt, settled again, read the wind, fired. Again, and again, and once more. 5 shots, each one a conversation between her and the rifle, between her and the memory of her father, between her and the still, quiet place inside herself where doubt couldn't reach. When her target came back, there was no sound on the range at all. All 5 shots had struck within a 3-inch circle, dead center. In variable wind, at 300 yards, with a bolt-action rifle and basic optics, she had outshot every single SEAL team operator. Webb stared at the target for a long time. Then he looked at Sarah with an expression she had never seen before, respect mixed with something like fear. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Sarah began packing up her rifle. "Just support personnel," she said. "Remember." By Monday morning, the story had spread through the Naval Special Warfare Center like wildfire. The girl who outshot the SEAL team. The corporal who beat the operators with an old rifle and iron nerves. Everywhere Sarah walked, she felt eyes on her, some curious, some resentful, some impressed. Captain Rodriguez found her during lunch and sat down with a knowing smile. "I heard about your weekend activities," she said. Sarah felt her face flush. "I'm sorry if I caused any." "Don't apologize. Do you know how long I've been waiting for someone to knock those boys down a peg?" Rodriguez leaned in. "But you should know, Sarah, this is going to make things harder for you, not easier." "What do you mean?" "You embarrassed them. And embarrassed men, especially men like that, they have 2 choices: admit you're better or find a way to tear you down. Most of them won't choose the first option." Rodriguez was right. Over the next few days, Sarah noticed the change. Some of the SEAL operators nodded to her respectfully in the halls, but others went out of their way to ignore her or to make subtle comments about luck, about how range shooting wasn't real combat, about how one good day didn't mean anything. Webb, to his credit, kept his word. He requested a meeting with Colonel Henderson, and Sarah was summoned to the colonel's office on Wednesday afternoon. This time, the colonel didn't keep her waiting. When she entered, both Henderson and Webb were there, along with a man she didn't recognize, an older gentleman in civilian clothes with steel-gray hair and piercing blue eyes. "Corporal Mitchell," Colonel Henderson said, his voice carefully neutral. "Petty Officer Webb has brought an unusual request to my attention. He says you performed well at a civilian range this past weekend." "I did my best, sir," Sarah said. "Your best," the colonel repeated. "He also says you outshot every operator present, including him." "Yes, sir." Colonel Henderson looked at the papers on his desk. "I'll be honest, Corporal. When Webb first came to me, I thought he was playing some kind of joke, but he was quite insistent, so I did some digging into your record." He pulled out a file, Sarah's file. "Expert marksman rating, 3 consecutive years. Deployed twice to Afghanistan. Received a commendation for actions during a base attack where you manned a defensive position for 6 hours. Your commanding officer wrote, and I quote, 'Corporal Mitchell showed exceptional courage and skill under fire, maintaining her position despite incoming mortar and small arms fire.'" The colonel looked up at her. "Why didn't you mention any of this when you first requested range access?" "You didn't ask, sir." A brief smile flickered across Henderson's face. "No, I suppose I didn't. I made assumptions. I was wrong to do so." He gestured to the man in civilian clothes. "Corporal Mitchell, this is retired Master Chief Marcus Reynolds. He runs the Advanced Marksmanship Program for SEAL training." Reynolds stepped forward and offered his hand. Sarah shook it, feeling the calloused grip of a man who had spent a lifetime shooting. "I've heard about your performance this weekend," Reynolds said. "Very impressive, especially with that Remington 700. That was your father's rifle, wasn't it?" Sarah felt her heart skip. "How did you know that, sir?" Reynolds smiled. "Because I knew your father. Robert Mitchell and I went through Scout Sniper School together about 30 years ago. He was the best shot I ever saw, right up until the day he died. I was at his funeral." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I didn't know that, sir." "He talked about you all the time. Showed me pictures of you shooting, told me you had his gift. I lost touch with him toward the end, but I always wondered what happened to his daughter." Reynolds looked at Colonel Henderson. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to test Corporal Mitchell on the SEAL range. If she performs as well as I think she will, I'd like to recruit her as an assistant instructor for the marksmanship program." Colonel Henderson looked surprised. Master Chief, you understand she's not special operations qualified, she's support personnel. I understand that, sir. But shooting is shooting. If she can teach my operators to shoot better, I don't care what her MOS is. The colonel was quiet for a long moment. Sarah could see the war playing out on his face, his old assumptions fighting against new evidence, his pride battling his duty. Finally, he sighed. Fine, we'll do a formal evaluation, this Friday 0900 on the Special Operations Range. Corporal Mitchell, you'll be tested by Master Chief Reynolds and a panel of senior marksmanship instructors. If you pass, we'll discuss next steps. If you fail, we never speak of this again. Understood? Yes, sir, Sarah said. Dismissed. Outside the office, Webb was waiting. He fell into step beside Sarah as she walked down the hall. I kept my word, he said. You did, thank you. Don't thank me yet. That evaluation is going to be brutal. Reynolds is fair, but he's tough. And there are going to be people on that panel who don't want you to succeed. I know. Webb stopped walking and turned to face her. Look, I was a jerk to you. I judged you without knowing anything about you, and I'm sorry for that. But I need you to understand something. The guys are watching this. If you fail, it confirms everything they believe about women in combat roles. If you succeed, it challenges everything they think they know. Either way, there's going to be fallout. I can't control what other people think, Sarah said. I can only control what I do. Webb nodded slowly. Your dad would be proud of you. I didn't know him, but any man who could raise a daughter who shoots like you and has the guts to stand up the way you did, he must have been something special. After Webb left, Sarah made her way back to her apartment. She had 4 days to prepare for the most important test of her military career. 4 days to prove that she belonged, not just for herself, but for every woman who had been told she wasn't good enough. That night, she took out her father's rifle again and held it in the darkness of her apartment. I hope I'm making you proud, Dad, she whispered. I hope I'm honoring what you taught me. The rifle, of course, said nothing. But in the silence, Sarah felt a certainty settling over her like a warm blanket. She had been preparing for this moment her entire life. She was ready. The next 4 days passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah spent every free moment at the range, shooting until her shoulder was bruised and her hands ached. She practiced with multiple weapons, rifles, pistols, even some she had never fired before, borrowing them from sympathetic operators who had heard about the upcoming evaluation. Captain Rodriguez helped her prepare mentally, role-playing difficult questions and scenarios. They're going to try to rattle you, Rodriguez warned. They're going to ask you about combat, about physical limitations, about whether you can teach men who have been shooting longer than you've been alive. You need to have answers ready. On Thursday night, the night before the evaluation, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in bed watching the shadows move across her ceiling, her mind racing through every possible scenario. What if she froze? What if her shooting failed her? What if all of this had been a terrible mistake? At 3 in the morning, she got up and pulled out a box from the back of her closet. Inside were letters her father had written her during his deployments, along with photos and mementos from their time together at ranges across the country. She found the letter she was looking for, the last one he had sent before he died. She had read it 100 times, but she read it again now. Sarah, it began in her father's precise handwriting. You're going to face moments in your life when you doubt yourself. That's normal. That's human. But I want you to remember something. Shooting, real shooting, isn't about the rifle or the target or even the score. It's about knowing who you are when everything else falls away. It's about finding that still, quiet place inside yourself where fear can't reach. You have that place, Sarah. I've seen it in you since you were a little girl. Trust it. Trust yourself. You're stronger than you know. Sarah folded the letter carefully and put it back in the box. Then she climbed back into bed and finally, mercifully, slept. Friday morning dawned clear and cool, perfect conditions for shooting. Sarah arrived at the Special Operations Range 30 minutes early, wearing her dress uniform as instructed. The range was unlike anything she had seen before, multiple bays with various distances, obstacles, and scenarios designed to test shooters under the most challenging conditions. Master Chief Reynolds was already there, along with 4 other senior instructors. Colonel Henderson stood off to the side, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Corporal Mitchell, Reynolds called out. Glad you're early, that's a good sign. Let me introduce you to the evaluation panel. The 4 instructors were all older men, all with the weathered look of career military. 2 were Navy, 2 were Marine Corps. Reynolds introduced them: Gunnery Sergeant Martinez, Lieutenant Commander Shaw, Chief Petty Officer Johnson, and Master Sergeant Clark. "Gentlemen," Reynolds said, "this is Corporal Sarah Mitchell. She's requested evaluation for our advanced marksmanship program. I've given you all her file, including her recent performance at the civilian range." Shaw, a thin man with suspicious eyes, spoke up. "Master Chief, with all due respect, why are we doing this? She's support personnel, not even a designated marksman, let alone a sniper. This seems like a waste of everyone's time." "Because I asked for this evaluation, Lieutenant Commander," Reynolds said firmly. "And unless you're questioning my judgment, I suggest we proceed." Shaw fell silent, but his expression remained doubtful. Reynolds turned to Sarah. "Corporal, this evaluation will consist of 4 parts. First, we'll test your basic marksmanship at various distances with various weapons. Second, we'll test your ability to shoot under stress and time pressure. Third, we'll test your knowledge of ballistics, wind reading, and advanced shooting theory. Fourth, and most important, we'll test your ability to teach. Any questions?" "No, Master Chief," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Then let's begin." The first part of the evaluation was straightforward, shooting at targets from 50 to 500 yards with both rifles and pistols. Sarah had trained for this, and her muscle memory took over. She shot slowly and deliberately, applying every lesson her father had taught her. When the targets were scored, her performance was nearly perfect. Only 1 shot out of 50 was outside the center ring, and that was at 500 yards in a tricky wind gust. Master Sergeant Clark, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "That's solid shooting, Corporal, but can you do it under pressure?" The second part of the evaluation made Sarah's pulse race. The instructors set up a scenario. She had to move from position to position, engaging multiple targets at various distances, all while wearing full gear and under a time limit. "This simulates combat conditions," Reynolds explained. "In the field, you don't get to take your time and get comfortable. You shoot when and where the opportunity presents itself. Begin on my mark." The whistle blew, and Sarah ran. She dropped into the first position, a prone stance behind a barricade, and engaged 3 targets at 200 yards. The weight of the gear made it harder to control her breathing, and the clock in her head was ticking down, urging her to rush. "Smooth is fast enough," she heard her father's voice say. She forced herself to slow down, to take that extra half-second to confirm her sight picture before each shot. She transitioned to the next position, a kneeling stance, engaging targets at 100 yards. Her knees dug into the gravel and sweat dripped down her back despite the cool morning. 3 more targets, 3 more shots. The final position required her to shoot from a standing position at 50 yards, the hardest stance to maintain steadiness. She could feel her heart pounding, could feel the weight of the rifle becoming heavier with each second. She fired her last 3 shots and lowered her rifle. "Time," Reynolds called out. 2 minutes, 43 seconds. The targets were scored. 9 hits out of 9, all in the center ring, though not as tightly grouped as her earlier shooting. Shaw examined the targets with a frown. "The grouping isn't as good as the bench shooting." "But every shot would have been effective in combat," Martinez countered. "And her time was excellent for someone who's not special operations qualified." The third part of the evaluation was oral. The panel asked her questions about ballistics, about how different environmental conditions affected bullet trajectory, about the technical aspects of various weapon systems. This was where Sarah's years of study paid off. Her father had taught her that shooting was as much science as art, and she had devoured every book, every manual, every piece of knowledge she could find. She answered question after question, sometimes explaining concepts with a depth that surprised the panel. "How do you know all this?" Johnson asked. "This is advanced material usually only taught in specialized schools." "I've been studying marksmanship since I was 12 years old, Chief. It's not just what I do, it's who I am." The final part of the evaluation was the one Sarah had feared most. Reynolds brought out a young SEAL operator, fresh from basic underwater demolition SEAL training, and told Sarah to teach him to improve his shooting. "Petty Officer Davis here shoots well enough to pass qualifications," Reynolds said, "but his groups are larger than we'd like. You have 30 minutes to diagnose his problems and help him improve. We'll be watching." Sarah felt the weight of all those eyes on her as she approached Davis. He looked skeptical, uncomfortable with the idea of being taught by someone who wasn't part of his community. "Petty Officer Davis," Sarah said, "I'm not here to tell you you're doing everything wrong. I'm here to help you get better. Will you work with me?" Davis glanced at the panel, then nodded. "Yes, Corporal." "Good. Let's see you shoot a group at 100 yards, and I'll observe." She watched as Davis set up and fired 5 shots. His technique was solid, good position, good trigger control. But she noticed something small, almost imperceptible. Between shots, his breathing pattern was irregular. He was taking breaths at different points in his respiratory cycle, which meant he was firing at different levels of oxygen in his blood, which affected his steadiness ever so slightly. "Davis," she said, "your technique is excellent, but I want you to try something. Before each shot, take 2 full breaths in and out, in and out. Then on the 3rd breath, breathe in, let half of it out, and fire at that point every single time. Same spot in the breathing cycle for every shot." "I already try to control my breathing," Davis said, a little defensively. "I know you do, but you're doing it instinctively, not systematically. Try it my way for 5 shots and see if there's a difference." Davis looked like he wanted to argue, but he complied. Sarah watched as he forced himself to follow the breathing pattern exactly. It was slower, more deliberate. When the target came back, his group size had shrunk by almost half. Davis stared at the target, then at Sarah. "How did you see that? My instructors in Bud S never mentioned my breathing." "Because they were looking at the big things, your stance, your grip, your trigger pull. Those were all solid. But sometimes it's the smallest details that make the difference between good shooting and great shooting." When the 30 minutes were up, Reynolds called Sarah back to the panel. Davis shook her hand and said quietly, "Thank you, Corporal, that actually helped." The panel conferred in low voices while Sarah stood at attention, trying not to let her nervousness show. This was it. Everything came down to this moment. Finally, Reynolds stepped forward. "Corporal Mitchell, the panel has completed our evaluation. Your marksmanship skills are exceptional, among the best we've seen, including from special operations personnel. Your knowledge of shooting theory is comprehensive and impressive, and your ability to teach, while limited to one demonstration, showed genuine insight and effectiveness." Sarah felt hope rising in her chest. "However," Reynolds continued, "there are concerns. Lieutenant Commander Shaw has expressed doubts about whether someone of your rank and experience can effectively instruct special operations personnel. Master Sergeant Clark has noted that you lack combat shooting experience. While you've been in combat zones, you've never had to engage enemy combatants at distance." The hope deflated. Sarah kept her face neutral, but inside she felt the familiar sting of rejection approaching. "That said," Reynolds went on, "I believe those concerns, while valid, can be addressed. Corporal Mitchell, the panel is prepared to offer you a provisional position as an assistant instructor in our marksmanship program. You would work under my direct supervision for the first 6 months. If your performance meets our standards, the position would become permanent. Your rank would be advanced to sergeant, and you would be redesignated as a marksmanship instructor." Sarah couldn't help it. Tears sprang to her eyes. She blinked them back rapidly. "Thank you, Master Chief. I won't let you down." "I know you won't. Your father never did either." Colonel Henderson, who had been silent through the entire evaluation, finally spoke up. "Master Chief, you're sure about this?" "Completely sure, sir." Henderson looked at Sarah for a long moment. "Corporal Mitchell, I owe you an apology. I judged you based on preconceptions rather than merit. That was wrong, and it won't happen again." "Thank you, sir," Sarah managed. "Don't thank me. You earned this. Make the most of it." As the panel dispersed, Martinez approached Sarah. "Corporal, excuse me, Sergeant Mitchell. That was some of the best shooting I've seen in my 26 years in the Corps. Your father taught you well." "He taught me everything, Gunny." "Then make sure you pass it on. That's how we honor the ones who came before us." Part 6, The Truth Revealed. 3 months into her new position, Sarah had settled into a routine that felt both challenging and deeply satisfying. She spent her days on the range, working with SEAL candidates and operators to refine their marksmanship skills. Some of the students were resistant at first. A female instructor was still a novelty and not always a welcome one. But Sarah had learned that the target didn't lie. When her students saw their groups tighten and their scores improve, skepticism turned to respect. Master Chief Reynolds had become a mentor and gradually a friend. During lunch breaks, he would tell her stories about her father, filling in gaps in her knowledge about the man who had shaped her life. "Your dad and I went through some hairy situations together," Reynolds said one afternoon as they sat in the range office. "But he never lost his cool. That's what made him such a good sniper, not just his shooting, but his ability to stay calm when everything was falling apart around him." "I wish I had known him as a Marine," Sarah said. "By the time I was old enough to understand what he did, he had retired. He was just dad to me." Reynolds smiled. "Just dad is the most important thing he ever was. He talked about you constantly, Sarah. You were his pride and joy." The warmth in those words stayed with Sarah through the afternoon training session. She was working with a group of SEAL candidates on long-range shooting when a commotion at the range entrance caught her attention. Colonel Henderson was striding across the range, and with him was someone Sarah never expected to see. A Marine Corps general, 3 stars on his collar, his bearing radiating authority. Master Chief Reynolds appeared beside her. "That's General Hartley," he murmured. "Commander of Marine Corps Special Operations. What's he doing here?" The general and Colonel Henderson approached, and Sarah called her students to attention. "As you were," General Hartley said, waving them back to their positions. "I'm here to observe, not interrupt. Carry on." For the next hour, Sarah tried to focus on instruction while acutely aware of the general watching her every move. He stood silent, arms crossed, his face revealing nothing. When the session ended and the students were dismissed, General Hartley approached Sarah directly. "Sergeant Mitchell," he said, "I've heard impressive things about your work here. Master Chief Reynolds speaks very highly of you." "Thank you, sir." "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. They walked along the edge of the range, Reynolds and Colonel Henderson trailing at a respectful distance. Sarah's mind raced. What did a 3-star general want with her? "Sergeant, how much do you know about your father's last assignment before his death?" the general asked. The question caught Sarah off guard. "I know he was instructing at the Mountain Warfare Training Center, sir. The official report said he died in a training accident, a fall during a mountain exercise." General Hartley stopped walking and turned to face her. "That's what the official report says, yes, but the truth is more complicated, and I think it's time you knew it." Sarah's heart began to pound. "Sir, your father wasn't just an instructor, Sergeant. 6 years ago, we had a situation, a sensitive operation that required a scout sniper with mountain warfare expertise. Your father volunteered. The operation was successful, but on the extraction, his team came under fire. Your father provided covering fire while his team made it to the helicopter. He was hit multiple times." The world seemed to tilt under Sarah's feet. "What?" "But the report said." "The report said what we needed it to say. The operation was classified. We couldn't reveal the truth without compromising national security and the safety of other personnel involved." General Hartley's expression softened. "Your father died a hero, Sergeant Mitchell. He saved 6 lives that day, including 2 hostages who would have been executed if the mission had failed." Tears streamed down Sarah's face now, and she didn't try to stop them. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because that operation has finally been declassified, and because I was the one who asked your father to volunteer for that mission. I've carried that weight for 6 years, knowing that a daughter believed her father died in a training accident when the truth was so much more." The general reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. "This belongs to you." Sarah opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was a Navy Cross, one of the highest military decorations for valor. "This was awarded to your father posthumously," General Hartley said. "But because the operation was classified, we couldn't present it to you at the time. That changes today. Your father was a warrior, Sergeant Mitchell, one of the best I ever knew." Sarah held the medal, feeling the weight of it, understanding now why her father's death had always felt incomplete to her. There had been pieces missing from the story, gaps that never made sense. "There's one more thing," General Hartley said. "The 2 hostages your father helped rescue, one of them was an aid worker. The other was a Marine Corps officer who went on to do important work in intelligence. Both of them are alive today because of your father's sacrifice." He gestured, and a woman stepped forward from where she had been standing near Colonel Henderson, Captain Rodriguez. Sarah stared at her in shock. "Ma'am." Rodriguez's eyes were red with tears. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you before, Sarah. The classification. I've wanted to tell you from the moment you arrived at this base. Your father saved my life. When I saw your name on the personnel roster, I knew I had to watch over you to help you however I could. Everything clicked into place. Rodriguez's immediate support, her guidance, her presence at crucial moments. She had been there not just as a fellow officer, but as someone who owed a debt to Sarah's father. I don't understand, Sarah whispered. Why reveal this now? General Hartley spoke again. Because, Sergeant Mitchell, we need you. We're developing a new advanced marksmanship program for female special operations personnel. The Marine Corps is fully integrating women into all combat roles, and we need instructors who can train them to the highest standards. Your performance here has been extraordinary. I'm offering you a position at the Marine Corps Special Operations Command, developing and running this program. Sarah looked at the medal in her hands, at Captain Rodriguez's tear-stained face, at Master Chief Reynolds, who was smiling with pride. Your father gave everything for his corps and his country, General Hartley said. Now you have a chance to continue his legacy in your own way. What do you say, Sergeant? Sarah thought about all the young women who would come after her, who would face the same dismissals, the same underestimation, the same battles she had fought. She thought about her father, not dying in a meaningless accident, but giving his life with purpose and courage. Sir, she said, her voice strong despite her tears, it would be an honor. 6 months later, Sarah stood at a different range, at Marine Corps Base Quantico, watching a group of female Marine recruits prepare for their marksmanship qualification. They were nervous, young, uncertain, just as she had been once. One of them, a small blonde girl who reminded Sarah of herself, was struggling. Her shots were inconsistent, and Sarah could see the frustration building. Sarah walked over and knelt beside her. What's your name, recruit? Private Chen, ma'am. I'm not a ma'am, I'm a sergeant, and I'm going to teach you something, Private Chen. Shooting isn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about finding that quiet place inside yourself where doubt can't reach. Let me show you. As Sarah worked with the young Marine, she felt her father's presence as clearly as if he were standing beside her. This was what he had taught her, not just how to shoot, but how to teach, how to lift others up, how to turn a skill into a legacy. On the wall of her office hung 2 items, her father's Navy Cross and a photo of the 2 of them at a range when she was 15. Both of them smiling, both of them holding rifles, both of them exactly where they belonged. Colonel Henderson had been wrong about her. The SEAL operators who had mocked her had been wrong. Everyone who had ever underestimated her had been wrong. But in a way, Sarah was grateful for all of it, because being underestimated had taught her to prove herself in the only way that mattered, through action, through skill, through quiet competence that spoke louder than words. She had outshot the SEAL team marksmen. She had earned the respect of the same men who had dismissed her. And now she was shaping the future of women in special operations, one trigger pull at a time. As she watched Private Chen finally find her rhythm and start hitting her targets with increasing confidence, Sarah smiled. That's it, she said quietly. You've got it just like that. And somewhere she knew her father was smiling too. Epilogue. A year after Sarah took her position at Quantico, Master Chief Reynolds called her with news. I thought you should know, he said. Colonel Henderson is retiring, and he specifically requested that you be invited to his retirement ceremony. Sarah was surprised. While her relationship with the colonel had improved, they had never become close. At the ceremony, Henderson sought her out during the reception. He looked older in civilian clothes, less imposing somehow. Sergeant Mitchell, he said, I wanted to thank you. Thank me, sir. For teaching an old man that he still had things to learn. I spent 30 years in the military thinking I knew what made a good warrior. You showed me I'd been looking at it all wrong. He extended his hand. Your father would be proud of the officer you're becoming. Sarah shook his hand. Thank you, sir, that means a lot. As Henderson walked away, Captain Rodriguez appeared at Sarah's elbow. You know what the best part of all this is? She asked. What's that, ma'am? You didn't just prove them wrong, you showed them a better way. That's real leadership, Sarah. That's what your father did for me and what you're doing for all those young women you train. Sarah looked around the room at the officers and enlisted personnel, at the mixing of generations and experiences, at the slow but steady change that was transforming the military. It's not about being better than anyone, Sarah said softly. It's about being the best version of yourself. That's what Dad taught me, and that's what I'm trying to pass on. Rodriguez raised her glass. to Master Sergeant Robert Mitchell, and to his daughter who carries his legacy forward. Sarah raised her own glass, feeling the weight of the past and the promise of the future balanced perfectly in this moment. To my father, she said, and to all the women who will never have to prove themselves the way we did. But even as she said it, Sarah knew the truth. There would always be battles to fight, respect to earn, barriers to break. But now, at least, there were more women ready to fight those battles, and they would do it together, supporting each other, lifting each other up. Just like her father had taught her. Just like she was teaching them. One shot at a time,